That's a big-time play.
Pressured by Hutchinson, he goes down again.
All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome into the Rise and Grind Morning Show. Did not plan on being on today, but we're gonna go through just a few things, and then of course this afternoon we have Jeff Dean on with Sports Info Solutions, going to walk us through the offensive line, breakdown, and kind of figure out where do these players fit? How do they fit? Do they fit with the Lions? Do they not fit with the Lions? What makes sense? Potentially at 7 or 50, or a move up into the top 40. So all of that later on today at 3 o'clock Eastern here on the Rockhound Detroit Lions channel. But this morning, I just want to go through some of the latest and greatest news, rumors, things that are kind of flying around since last night. Bear with me here. I'm still trying to get OBS to behave, but we're almost there. And I wanted to start with Avonte Maddox. So once I get this article loaded, we're gonna pop it in. We're gonna talk about it. Avonte Maddox obviously is one of the players that I wanted to see back this season. He was high on my list as a free agent acquisition. I was never really out on the fact that he wouldn't be back. I'm surprised it took as long as it did, but maybe the potential was there for Avonte Maddox to kind of comb through the free agency market and see what the best fit was. Or hey, we don't even know if there was a deal kind of already in place, and these things would be announced later. But my first question for you guys this morning is, and I kind of said this last night in the chat, is this looking more like there's issues with Kirby Joseph not being ready? If you guys remember back at the Combine, I asked Brad Holmes, Lions general manager, about center, and I also asked Dan Campbell about the conversation with Kirby and kind of where that's going this year and how that conversation's flowing. Is he going to be ready to play this year? And his answer was a few more weeks, right? We should have a clear answer on that. It's the same thing that we heard, at the end of the season when they were kind of asked about Kirby Joseph. So for me, I'm looking at the timeline here. Surprised we don't have anybody in today, but is what it is. I'm looking at the timeline and I'm wondering, is this speaking more to the Kirby situation, that it's been a few weeks since the Combine? I mean, the Combine was at the end of February, so it's been multiple weeks, right? I mean, we're already into April 7th, so we're looking at 5 weeks later. Brad Holmes was asked just a couple of weeks ago in an interview the situation with Kirby, and again, it was kind of the same answer. A couple more weeks, we should have a clear answer. So what's happened at every, stop along the way? A couple weeks after the Combine, the Lions sign who, right? Who the Lions bring in? Multiple players, safeties, box safeties, free safeties. I'll give you all those names here real quick. Well, you brought in like Christian Izien, Chuck Clark, who's the most recent after or before Avonte Maddox. And did Spotrac change their? They did. They changed their logo. Let me see if I can break this down by date. It should be flashing across the screen. I don't know if I took the dates out or not. I might have. Looks like I took the dates out to make it all fit. But they should be in order as to kind of when those players were added. But anyway, as of late, you have Roger McCreary that was added. Clearly, he can play on the outside, more of that nickel slot type of a player for the Lions. But he is, he's a unique individual. He can kind of play inside outside. Rock Ya-Sin brought back for the corner help. Izien brought in more so as that box safety. He can kind of do a little bit of what Branch does. Also help you up on the line. In the run game, and then special teams, like a lot of special teams for Christian Izien. And so now you bring in Chuck Clark, which if you look at Chuck Clark's, let's see if I can get this up on the screen now. if you look at kind of where he lines up and where he's played, man, I got to sign into everything. Hold on, y'all. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. I was just saying last week, like, hopefully this is the last one. We went through like 8 updates, it seems like. And now we went through a few more. But I told OBS to wait, and I don't think they did. Anyway, so Chuck Clark, if you kind of look at where his snaps were, well, let me get this on screen. Take a look at his premium stats. I think I must be in an incognito window. That's why it's asking me for all this stuff. Let me get his snaps up here. All right, so we see where he kind of lines up all over the place. Now, this is week by week. Let me just scroll right to the end. Played for Pittsburgh last year, right? I believe. Was it Pittsburgh or the Jets last year? So lined up in the box 103 times. Right linebacker, left linebacker about 30 times apiece. Strong safety, looks like 9. Strong safety left, 19. Strong safety right, 8. So slot corner 53 times. Wide corner 5 times. But free safety is 261. So that's the number that should jump out at you, right? 261. So what is he brought in to do? Well, I guess what I would say, just based on his alignment, and we could probably go year by year, right? Let's take a look what he did in 24. Let's look at his alignment. As I think when you look at players, you have to look, where do they line up? Where do they play? How do they fit into the defense? How are they going to help us? Like, you're not just going to bring in a safety to bring in a safety. You're not going to bring in a strong safety to play free safety. It's too. I know it seems like safety is just safety, but safety is just not safety. Like, 2 totally different positions, 2 totally different styles of football player. The IQ is totally different. The body size is different. So it matters, right? It matters. I mean, he does play in the box in 2024, 272 times, but he also free safety. I mean, his primary position, 347 times, in total 718 snaps that year in 2024. Let's go back to 2023. I'm not sure that he even played in 23. It looks like he didn't. Was he injured in 23? I don't know the answer to that. All right, let's look at 22. All right, 22. He played the most amount of snaps at free safety, 494. Slot corner, 170. Wide corner, 30. That's just alignment, depending on what the offense calls, right, where it kind of pulls the safety out to the boundary there. And then in the box, 323 times. So I think that's good enough, right? He's more of a free safety. What is Kirby? Kirby's a free safety. So as you go along now, the last couple of weeks since the combine, we brought in a couple of safeties, and now we brought back Avonte Maddox. Now Avonte Maddox. Now yesterday I was saying I couldn't remember why they really brought him in. He's versatile. He was known as being versatile, but I think he played primary corner. The last many seasons, at least that I can remember. I'm going to go take a look at his snaps just to double check. Yeah, slot corner 259 times in 2024. Wide corner, not so much. Free safety a couple of times, like 21. So when you look at the Lions bringing this guy in, it was probably to help out in that slot corner position as a backup to Amik Robertson, and then someone you can utilize in special teams. Let's take a look at what he did the year before that. I don't think he had a lot of snaps that year. I think he was injured that year. Yeah, we'll skip 23. Let's go back to 22. Throw it up on the screen. So when you take a look at Avonte Maddox here, slot corner 360 times. This is back in 22. Wide corner 24. Free safety 21. Right? Just 474 snaps there in 2022. What he did for the Lions last year, played in the box 67 times, played at the free safety position 248 snaps. So that was a position for him that he has not spent a lot of time at. When he was brought in, it was probably primary, inside nickel, outside nickel, the occasional boundary. But that's not where he does the majority of his work. And if you go back to the last many seasons, like I just did, I didn't have it all on screen, but let's go all the way back to 2021. Slot corner, 612 times. Wide corner, 22 times. Box safety, 72. No free safety. I mean, nine snaps at free safety is like almost by accident, right? No, it's just alignment. It's whatever defense they're in. So he was brought in to hang out in the slot, and then he ends up getting pushed out to free safety. So I thought he played pretty well when he was in last year. I mean, it wasn't perfect. There was a lot of issues with that defense last season, a lot of injuries, and I would say that was probably the primary issue for the defense was working on the injury factor and how you're going to bring in players to help you through the course of the season. And it didn't work out for the Lions. Like we just had way too many injuries. So I guess where I'm going with this, and I'm going to bring in an article here. I think it's by, I thought it was by Tim Twentyman. It could be one of these here. Here we go. Rainer Sabin from the Detroit Free Press. I had never really read much of his stuff. So Lions bring back Avonte Maddox yesterday, and I think that this is a clear indication that there still might be some lingering issues here with Kirby Joseph. You don't bring in a free safety in Chuck Clark. You don't bring in a free safety in Avonte Maddox, or utilized as a free safety last year, and continue to pepper this secondary with safeties if you're expecting one or both of your safeties to be able to play early and often this season. So I'm thinking that there's more of an issue in the safety room than what's being let on here. I think that none of us should really be comfortable. That's just my opinion with Brad Holmes not selecting a safety in this draft. I've said it many times. It would be irresponsible for Brad Holmes not to address this position like this position is like empty. Right? That Kirby is not there at all, period. That's how I would address it. You've already paid the guy. Okay? So you've got an out next year. He's going to play this season or attempt to play this season. And you know what? Maybe it turns out for the better. But I think that if you look at the position overall in the future, you bring in a safety. There's 3 safeties at the top of this board that could all help you. Now, the direct replacement for Kirby Joseph, my opinion, would be Dylan Thieneman. He is the clear free safety in this draft. Caleb Downs is more of your box safety. And Emmanuel McNeil-McWarren is more of that strong safety, more of the Brian Branch style. But I think that Emmanuel McNeil-Warren would give you the immediate leverage that you need. You want that smaller linebacker. And if you look at what Emanawari did, man, he played that small linebacker position to a T. I mean, he really did some great work last year. Big reason why, that defense had a lot of success. And I do think that there's going to be a philosophical change to this defense this year as well, that, the linebackers are going to have a little bit more involvement. We've kind of seen that. Since last year when I was at camp, I noticed it. The Lions definitely had tried to use the linebackers a little bit more last season with blitzing. And that's, I think, a big reason why you don't see the Lions going after this big edge position all the time. It's failing in the fans' eyes that the Lions are not going after an edge. So I guess before I get into that part of it, let me just finish this little article here on Avonte Maddox where they talk about how last year Avonte Maddox returned to the Motor City and joined his hometown team's quest to win its first Super Bowl. There you go. And now he's back with the Lions to continue that pursuit. I think it's a great pickup. I really do. I think Avonte Maddox fits this defense, and I think he played well enough last year to earn a comeback. Now, he's got to battle for a position just like everybody else, but I would say that between him and Chuck Clark and Izzy, and I mean, those three are going to be battling for some time at at all three positions there. Now, he was signed back on Monday. Obviously, today is Tuesday, but he was signed back on Monday. Last night is when it was announced. He appeared in 14 games last year and made 3 starts in 2025. Valuable depth piece for the secondary that became depleted, obviously, last fall. Injuries, sideline cornerbacks Terry and Arnold and DJ Reed, as well as safeties Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. The versatile Maddox mainly floated between the slot position and the back line of the defense. By back line, does he mean free safety? I would hope so. Over 342 defensive snaps, Maddox contributed 32 tackles, forced a fumble, secured an interception, and made 4 pass breakups. So, I mean, it's a pretty solid year for a backup, right? Somebody that you brought in to hopefully not give you a bunch of significant snaps, but he ended up giving us some significant snaps. And so now you're looking at an opportunity where he's going to do the same thing again. So he's 30 years old. He played his first 7 seasons with the Eagles. And I think, honestly, he's not the front runner. I would say that you would think that. A lot of people think that he's the front runner to get out there and play early. He's going to have to work for it, just like everybody else. He's going to have to work at it. So Avonte Maddox is back. The bigger question is, what does it mean for Kirby Joseph? Is this just Brad Holmes being extra careful and making sure that he has enough players to fill every role and be heavy going into camp in case injuries happen, right? In case injuries happen. The other article that I wanted to go through this morning, there's a few that we'll go through, but the other article I wanted to go through, and I got to find it. Got to find it here. It was kind of talking about the Lions having this lackluster of an off season, right? In free agency, and that a unnamed former executive was giving his thoughts on the whole situation. Now, very rarely, if ever, do I use an unnamed source. I think I've done it twice. Now, my guy that I have, right? I mean, I'll obviously never burn that individual, but I'm very clear that it's a former executive that has worked throughout the league. I don't know who this individual is, and they're obviously not going to tell us, but we're going to go through this. The Lions not having a notable free agency is the sentiment here. And so I'm going to ask you, do you agree or disagree right off the get, without even going through this, that the Lions did not have a notable offseason? I don't agree, clearly. I don't agree. I think they did exactly what they needed to do. And you were never going to see the big names coming into Detroit. Quite simply, look, I think that we all get it by now. The Lions don't have the money to do it. And even if they did, I still don't think that they would. And I think that's their philosophy, right? That's how they manage their team. That's how they view their roster. That's how they view their defense. That's how they view this team growing. They invest heavily into the draft for a reason. They want to manage their cap from a draft perspective. They want to ensure that they have players on this team for the long haul. Now, we've discussed numerous times here. Let me back out of this just for a moment. I got to get a better ad blocker. Speaking of ads, just picked up three more partners yesterday. I'm excited to be talking about them here soon, but I've got to do some stuff on the back end to get it ready. The Lions draft and develop for a reason. I've spoken about the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman. I've spoken about Les Snead, which, if you have never listened to Les Snead talk, what a goofy dude. Like he's goofy. But he's done things also at a very, for a very certain reason. Investing into drafting. The Seahawks, they invested into drafting. And look what happened to them last year, right? They were never just one player away, but Sam Darnold had a damn good season. And when your quarterback has that good of a season, stays healthy, can stay on the field, and your defense stays healthy, I mean, mostly the entire team stayed healthy, you can go the distance with any team in the league, any team. But there's certain teams that are going to obviously be a lot, in a much better position because of how they've done in the drafting and how they've done with drafting and how they've done in free agency. Brad Holmes has been building this team since 2021. If you go back and look at the teams that win and win at a high level, they have a majority of players on their roster that are drafted. In every Super Bowl, there's been very, very few and far between that you will see a team that has gone out and spent boatloads of money in free agency and then turn around and won a Super Bowl. Because if that were the case, the New England Patriots should have won it last year. But they didn't. Now, they made it there. I think when you're operating from a fourth place schedule, right, and kind of had a really easy schedule, and they also stayed very healthy, they had a good opportunity just like anybody else did. They kind of met perfect opportunity when other teams were down and out. They had a perfect opportunity to capitalize in each one of those games. So the reason why the Lions were never going to be heavy investors into another edge, right, opposite of Aiden, is one, it's not needed. It's just not needed, right? What is the difference between a 10 sack plus guy, a 10 to 15? I mean, anything north of 10 sacks is an incredible year. What did we have last year? Less than 15 players, I think, had north of 10 sacks, had double-digit sacks. That's all players. All right, that's not just edge. That's all players. It might have been 17. So it's rare, right? It's rare. So what's the difference between a 10-plus sack guy and a 6-plus sack guy or 6-sack guy? And I would say not much. And I would also say it depends on what they do on the other downs. Are they getting a lot more TFLs? You might have 6 sacks. Let's say you have 30 TFLs. And maybe the 10-sack guy has 10 sacks and 5 TFLs, or 12 TFLs, we'll say. Can't remember if they charge a TFL with a sack. I would hope that they don't do that, but they might. Certain stat agencies might do that. You get the point, right? If you're doing more on the other downs, you're helping the defense. You're creating opportunity for the defense. Eventually to turn the ball back over to your offense. Are you batting balls down? Are you getting TFLs? Because those are just as important as a sack. And in most cases, they're more important. If it's a 3rd and 8 and Tyleik Williams jumps up and bats the ball down, but he didn't get in the backfield, you can charge that as a sack if you really wanted to. You could charge it as a TFL. The point is, it's a zero-sum play. The offense didn't advance. They're probably going to punt the ball now. So you didn't need a sack if you just get your hands up. And last year, there was an emphasis on getting your hands up. There was also an emphasis on the peanut punch. And the Lions, I think, have been doing a great job over the last couple of seasons of trying to manufacture takeaways without sacrificing what they do as a tackler or, what they do from a positional standpoint. If you're just gunning for the quarterback on every play, you're going to miss a lot of opportunity. You're going to miss a lot of tackles. You're probably going to bite and miss the ball carrier zooming right around you. So there's all of those things that I believe come into factor here, come into play here, that there's more that a defensive tackle or a defensive end or a linebacker can do to affect a play than just get a sack. So getting an edge opposite of Aiden, I would say that if you were to identify, I guess let's just identify, 3 or 4 things. When you think of edge, you think 1, sacks, right? 2, run game, run defense. And I would say, honestly, that's 1. 3, negative plays. You want to create negative plays. 4, being a 3-down player, being a 3-down player. If you're just a sack artist, if you're just a pass rush specialist, I mean, I would say that's a unique position to be in, and I think that those positions are also important. The Lions have not really invested in just a pass rush specialist. Maybe we'll see that a little bit more this year, but I would leave that up to my linebackers to figure out a way to have a pass rush specialist from that standpoint. I would not want, as a coach or a GM, I would not want to see where my team is allowing too many missed tackles or too many missed opportunities because you're focused on just one thing. And so if you just identify these 4 things, maybe they're not the same 4 things that you're thinking about, but sacks, run defense, negative plays, and being a 3-down player, well, who is that player going to be on the opposite of Aiden? When you look at Aiden, okay, he checks the box for sacks. He does not really check the box. I'm going to give him, a kind of a straight line here instead of a check mark for the run defense. It's good. It's not great, and there's a lot of missed tackles. Negative plays. I would say that Aiden, again, is kind of right in the middle, maybe a little bit further up than just from the middle with negative plays because he's picked off a few balls. He's picked up a couple of fumbles, but he doesn't get a ton of TFLs. And he gets a sack or he kind of disappears, or he gets an interception, then he kind of disappears in a game. So he's more of that pass rusher, right? He's more of that guy that you're trying to send to get after the quarterback, and he's not focused 100% on, I mean, he should be, but I don't think he's focused 100% on all of the play. I think he's trying to get the quarterback primarily. And we've seen where they've kind of changed his plan up a little bit, trying to put him in better positions to win. And we've seen where they've utilized him, in that contained defense too, where they're telling him to kind of hang back a little bit. There was a couple of games last year, the Ravens being one, where we saw growth out of Aiden from that perspective. And I thought that was one of his best games. Whether I don't remember if he had a sack in that game or not, but I would say that was one of his best games. So pinning your ears back and just going all the time can get you in trouble. But being that 3-down player, is Aiden really a 3-down player? And I would say no. So if we're going to put Aiden into a box, at least right now, and let's say 2026 is probably Aiden's breakout season. Like, I'm calling it for Aiden. I'm trying to stab myself with a pen too. I'm calling it for Aiden this year. I think that he's going to have a breakout year. And I'm not saying sacks. I think that this is going to be Aiden's best year where he starts to put it all together. And when that happens, Aiden is going to take that next step in the hierarchy of defensive ends in the NFL. All he has to do is focus a little bit more on the run defense and worry about getting his hands up a little bit more on some of those wide throws, right? Maybe not biting so hard on the misdirection or the play action and following the ball a little bit better. He just has to clean a couple of little things up. Last year, he was working his way back from a major injury, still statistically put out, some good stats. But I think if you look at his game overall, there were some holes. And every player has holes. Every player has things to work on. It's not a negative. I think that if there's no growth the next year, then maybe you would start to attribute some negatives to that. But I feel like Aiden is grown in many different directions year after year. It's just not 100% there. And last year you can put, a lot of that to the injury, especially early. So if Aiden's more of our pass rush guy, right, I think he'll put it together, all of it. But let's just say right now he's more of our pass rush guy. So what does that mean for the other side? What do you want on the other side? Do you want a guy that's just gunning after the quarterback on every play? Or do you want a guy that's setting an edge, right, forcing the ball towards Aiden, forcing the ball to the interior, telling offenses, hey, you're not coming to this side because we're going to set a hard edge and we're going to force you to turn inside. That's what you're looking for. You're not looking for a guy that just gets after the quarterback, because if you have two guys getting after the quarterback, now you have two ends of your defense that have giant holes, right? The minute you crash, which there's nothing wrong with crashing, you just have to use it situationally. But if you crash and you leave that C gap open, you're going to have a lot of run plays going right, outside of you. And I think that's where Aiden is kind of, had some tough games when he crashes quite a bit. So on the other side, you need that run stuffer, right? And so when you look at players in this draft that kind of meet that need, I would say Keldrick Falk is your number one. He's your number one run stuffer right now. If you're getting outside of Arvell Reese and David Bailey, I would say that Keldrick Falk is going to be in your truest sense of the word, a run stuffer from day one. His pass rush is no upside right now. Well, there's upside, but it's going to take a minute for his pass rush to kind of meet his run defense. And I'm okay with that. If the Lions were to take a guy like Keldrick Falk, I think that you're taking him not because he's an edge rusher or defensive end. It's because he's a run-stuffing defensive end. He's a guy that's going to set a hard edge. I think he's 6'4", 270? Something like that. But his run defense is solid. So I would say the Lions are looking for a player like that. But who do we bring in? Right? So who did the Lions bring in this year to maybe settle up the other side a little bit? And how does that fit with the draft? Like that's a big question, right? How does it fit with the draft? And so where we're going to go next is we're going to go to this article, and then we're going to try to talk this out a little bit as far as what did the Lions really do to shore up both sides of the football, but primarily the defense that had a lot of holes, right? That had a lot of holes. So let's bring this article back in, and then once I'm done with the article, we'll dip into the chat. And I don't know if Eric's listening, but like I told Eric I was going to be off today. I decided to do this last minute. He's got a lot of stuff going on. He's got a big show this week. So if you're in Wyoming, Michigan this week, or anywhere outside of Wyoming, you want to make a trip in to go visit Eric, he's going to be at the, what mall is that called? It's the mall that's right there on like 28th and Clyde Park, between Clyde Park and Burlingame. It's like the old Rogers Plaza Mall. I forget. There might be a new name now. I used to go there all the time as a kid. I went to high school right across the street. And that's where Hot and Now used to be, like right down that. I used to go to Hot and Now all the time when I was a kid. Loved it. The Hot and Now that's now by Gun Lake Casino is trash buckets. It is god awful. It doesn't taste anywhere close to the same. Was a huge. I was gonna go do a live event there, and when I went and ate it, I'm like, yeah, I'm not supporting this. It was terrible. They should have never got rid of Johnny Rockets, man. They should put Johnny Rockets back in. So anyway. Let's get into the article. All right, so this is by Michael Kalwander. Okay, Kalwander. NFL execs remain unfazed by the Lions' free agency moves, and that's a problem. Is it? Is it really a problem? I don't know about all that. Detroit Lions fans continued to make their voices heard on the Lions' underwhelming offseason, coming off of a last-place finish in the NFC North. But what do other NFL executives across the league think of the Lions' offseason? Those, quote, in the room where it happens. Okay. Are they in the Lions' room? Huh. Anyway, that they can offer a perspective that fans don't have. Can they? I don't know any executive out there that's going to say, man, I'm really scared of the Lions. Man, they did way too much. I don't think we can compete with them this year. They ain't going to say that. Come on now. Anyway, suffice it to say, they're underwhelmed too. Well, who's they and they are? Mike Sando of The Athletic with various NFL executives about the moves. Mike Sandos of The Athletic spoke with various NFL executives about the moves each NFC team made this season. And one anonymous executive, only one, remember, so out of all of these executives, only one, right? Not two, not three, not four, not 16, one said, quote, to me, they did not do anything notable from a personnel standpoint. outside of some special teams guys they added, which I think were pretty good for them, end quote. Okay, I'm going to pause here. We have 3 teams on this team, right? Right, you have 3. Offense, defense, and special teams. If your special teams is really good, can you or can you not win games with special teams? I'm pretty sure you can. And I'm pretty sure special teams have played a very important role in winning some football games. So we'll go on to read the rest of the article, where it says anything notable might be too harsh when it comes to the team's bigger signings like center Cade Mays and nickel corner Roger McCreary, who are seen as firm upgrades over their predecessors. In Mays' case, he was arguably the second best C on the market, center, and the Lions got a great deal for him, given how many teams were also in the market for a center. Why don't you just spell it out? There's a lot more words that start with C that you could put in place there. It also keeps second-year guard Tate Ratledge at right guard, further solidifying the interior. That executive is on point with special teams, which has been the most wide-ranging turnover of the 3 units. Sando highlights that Damone Clark signing, saying Clark, quote, made 8 solo tackles on special teams last season, more than anyone else currently on the Lions. Exciting, right? End quote. For the most part, that anonymous executive sentiment echoes that of the Lions faithful, not many Lions faithful that I know, who believe that the team was in a position to make aggressive moves like signing Tyler Linderbaum or pass rusher Trey Hendrickson or spinning a trade for fellow pass rusher Max Crosby. Huh. Those are the only 3 players that the Lions should have targeted, huh? So we should have gotten Max, who apparently has something else going on other than the injury with his knee. We should have spent $100+ million on Trey Hendrickson, and we should have spent $100+ million on Tyler Linderbaum, who broke the new center, kind of broke the league, I guess, with his contract, the new center contract, $27 million a year. Now, what I said about Tyler Linderbaum, which ended up holding true, was that the Lions were involved in the Tyler Linderbaum race. Brad Holmes echoed that when he said that there were only 2 centers that they were interested in, Tyler and Cade. Now, when that contract ballooned from the $22 million to $27 million, I thought it was going to be 25. It even went further than what I thought. And people thought I was crazy for thinking it was going to be $25 million. Ends up being 27. If the Lions would have signed Tyler Linderbaum for $27 million, you wouldn't have gotten any of these other players that we brought in this year. You maybe a couple, but you could forget bringing in Rock Ya-Sin, DJ Wanham, Christian Izien, Damone Clark, Roger McCreary, Greg Dortch. I mean, all of these players are pretty much gonzo at that point, especially players like Larry Borum at $5 million, Rock Ya-Sin at 3.2, DJ Wanham at 3, Malcolm Rodriguez at 2.8, Christian Izien at $2 million. That right there is like half the contract of Tyler Linderbaum. You're not going to have the room for that. You're just not. The Lions are barely, in positive cap space anyway. You don't have the room. Could they have kicked the can? Sure. Could they have opened up Penei Sewell or Amon-Ra St. Brown's contract and done something unique? They could have. Absolutely. But then next year, what happens? The same thing that happens with every other team that does this. You're going to lose half of your team because you're not going to be able to keep them. Because when you bring in a guy like Tyler Linderbaum, you can't get rid of him. You can't. He's stuck, and you're stuck with that contract unless you've uniquely, done something inside that contract that finds you an out, which not going to happen. Not in the first 2 seasons. So the question would be, and I think Attila just kind of put it in the chat there. Does Tyler Linderbaum make up for the play of all of the other 5 or 6 guys that we just brought in? The answer is no. He doesn't. Now, as much as I love Tyler Linderbaum's film, And as much as I would have been over the moon to have Tyler Linderbaum in the Honolulu Blue, I'm also pretty frugal in understanding that it would have detonated the team financially. And it's the same thing that's going to be said for Trey Hendrickson. It's the same thing that can be said for Max Crosby and anybody else. Look, I'm going into my third made season doing this. And I've been saying it now for over 4 years. Before I started doing this, there was no way in hell the Lions were going to do that. Not when they were first starting to build the roster in 21 or 22. That's just not part of most teams' plan. I'm not saying that it couldn't have been. I mean, when you look at Ryan Poles and what he did in Chicago, he kind of went out and bought some expensive guys right out, to get. How did that work out? Right? Well, go look at their record from 21 to 24. Not very good. Not very good at all. So you go out and spend all that money, and you don't really get the return on your investment. Not saying that Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson wouldn't be amazing players. Trey Hendrickson's the only guy that I've ever agreed made the most sense for Detroit. But at his age and at the amount of money that you're paying him, it just doesn't add up for me. And where it does add up is if DJ Wanham and Peyton Turner, who collectively are going to be making... What's Turner's contract? I don't know Turner's contract yet. Let me click on this. Let me see if we have any numbers at all. His market value was around $1.9 million. I have to imagine that his number is a little bit higher than that. Let's see here. Yeah, okay. So it's right there. It was less than that. He got about $1.2 million. So collectively between Peyton Turner and DJ Wanham, well, keep going back. There we go. You're going to pay about $4.5 million this year. Now, if both of those guys have more sacks than Trey Hendrickson, more tackles than Trey Hendrickson, more TFLs than Trey Hendrickson, would you agree or disagree that that was the right move? Because that's the only thing you need to look at. It's not player for player. It's two players that are rotating. And now what I've always said would have been great for Brad Holmes. Do not go give me a $40 million guy. Don't do that. You need depth, right? So wouldn't it make more sense that you go out and get 3 tier 2 players that equal the amount of one big contract? Or 4 tier 2 players that equal the amount of one big contract? Or even better yet, 3 tier 2 players, Aiden Hutchinson, a draft pick, and Ahmed Hassanin. And then there you go. Right? You have your depth. You have your starters, but you have good high quality depth. Yeah, they're not going to love their snap counts, but it's going to extend their career, and they're getting paid. So what does it matter? Do you want to win, or do you want to play more? I think most players would say they want to win, right? I think the amount of snaps that they play, I don't know a player that would want to play less snaps or wouldn't want to play less snaps, making more money per snap, keeping their body healthy, especially when you're on a short contract and you could go get another contract elsewhere if need be, right? If it just worked out that way. And you probably up your value, right? If Peyton Turner has an excellent year this year, his value is going to go through the roof. Right? He'll easily be making 10, 15, 20 million next year if he has a good year. And by good year, you're talking a half a dozen sacks or more, and being somebody, right, on the defense. So the question remains, did the Lions really have an underwhelming free agency? And I could never say that. I'm looking at all these players. Cade Mays filled a huge need. Right? Huge need, and he's a good football player who's ascending. Doesn't have to be our center, right? He would be one of the best guards on this team, day one. But right now you slide him in at center. Larry Borum, I get it. A lot of people aren't excited about him, but he's versatile, and he's a great depth piece. He could be a starter on day one if need be. Rock Ya-Sin proved himself last year. He was very valuable. Malcolm Rodriguez has always been valuable. Definitely a special teamer, but he's been utilized in other places. Christian Izien, again, a hell of a special teamer, but can also carve out a good position for him, as a nickel, a nickel back. When he started his career, he was playing extremely well. He was edged out because of high draft picks. That was the way that Tampa did it. They went with the higher draft picks as opposed to the player that might have been better. And I would say that Christian Izuna is probably a little bit better than advertised. Isaiah Pacheco filled a huge need, and he gives us more speed. You know, you don't have a big drop off between him and Jahmyr Gibbs. Damone Clark, he's just not appreciated enough. Again, another player that was edged out and ended up playing a little bit more special teams. Just because he was playing special teams does not mean he can't play on the defense. Does not mean that. Roger McCreary, yeah, look, he's a little bit light, a little bit short arms, right? But you look at his play, and I think it speaks for itself. Another guy that can play special teams, but he could instantly go in and recover what Amik Robertson left behind. Maybe even a better player than Amik Robertson. Greg Dortch, we needed a punt kick returner. We were going to lose Khalif Raymond. We weren't going to pay him $5 million. No way. You're not losing anything with Greg Dortch. It's a lateral move. You got younger and better, honestly. I've already compared those two, and there's no drop-off. Trevor Nowaski, look, this is a guy the Lions never wanted to lose 3 years ago. They lost him briefly, got him back. He's just a heck of a depth player. Another player on special teams, too. All of your depth guys should be playing special teams. I don't think that's any secret. Tyler Conklin, he's going to bring a lot of energy to that tight end room. And he's also going to give you somebody that can produce at a high level when called upon. Hasn't really been called upon, but he can do it. He's been known to have some pretty good seasons. You have to call his number. Tom Kennedy wasn't going anywhere. Another guy that proved, that he can fill in immediately in the kick return game, also on special teams, and is that emergency wide receiver when needed. Avonte Maddox, again, proved himself last year in the safety room. Our safeties were some of the highest graded safeties in the league last season, even though there was a relatively low amount of snaps for some of those guys. They were playing at a high level. The problem was there was too many holes. Just too many holes, right? You can only do what you can do. Peyton Turner, again, a lot of people are putting him in that Marcus Davenport number 2 box. I get it. I put him in the Marcus Davenport number 2 box simply because of his size and what he offers, right? And former first round pick, has not had the greatest of careers because of injuries. If he holds it all together this year, Peyton Turner is going to turn it on. If you have not watched film on this guy, he's a complete wrecking ball. He just needs to stay healthy and needs confidence. Well, that confidence is going to come when you're working across with Aiden Hutchinson and the rest of this defense. He's going to be held to a higher standard. And so Peyton Turner's absolutely going to be able to turn it on. And then, the rest of the guys, like I think I mentioned everybody, but, the rest of the guys that I did not mention, there's a place for all of them. And it doesn't mean every one of these players is going to make the team. Lions have 9 draft picks. I think 7 of them are on day 3. Let me ask you another question. How many of those players do you honestly feel are going to make the roster? Not many. Not many. So this article goes on to say that there's still the NFL draft to target the pass rusher or right tackle of the future. So the jury's still out in the offseason. However, this anonymous executive's opinion offers some degree of validation for the Lions fans who are also underwhelmed. Someone who knows how the sausage gets made, not being impressed by what Holmes is cooking, could be seen as a big red flag for what's to come this season. Then again, without knowing who this executive is and what front office they're a part of, their words could just as easily be a green flag instead. Everyone's in wait-and-see mode with the new offseason coaches or new offensive coaches. It's not just the on-field personnel who will look different next season. Perhaps the biggest move the Lions made this offseason was officially firing offensive coordinator John Morton and hiring Petzing to replace him. Lions fans had a strong reaction to Petzing hire and the fact that he wasn't a big name like Mike McDaniel. I'm going to stop there. I told y'all Mike McDaniel was never coming to Detroit. The Lions did their due diligence. He was not a fit. The Lions even said as much after interviewing him. The dude's a little bit weird around the edges. He just is. He's got a good brain for offense, but something just exudes off of Mike McDaniel that just does not align with what the Lions are all about. And I'm sorry, if you wanted a guy to come in and kind of be on a layover, right? He's just going to be here for a year, have a great season, then see you later, bye. That's Mike McDaniel. The Lions don't want a guy in a layover. They want somebody like Petzing, who's hopefully going to be invested for the next couple of seasons at a minimum. They back that up with Mike Kafka, who could easily have been an offensive coordinator himself. And so now you have two guys working together, both of them offensive brains. You got a 2-for-1 value here. And if one should leave next year, you still have the other. That's the goal. And if neither of them leave, even better. But you have the run dominance, the 13 personnel dominance of Petzing, who can do everything else as well. I mean, the guy's an absolute genius with the way that he puts his offensive plans together. And then you have Kafka, who's known as the pass game specialist, knows how to get these guys into situations to beat the defense. And you have them both together. So I think what the Lions did here, bar none, might have been the best hires of the entire league. And I'm not saying that with bias. I'm saying that because when I dug into each one of these guys and put together the articles that I put together in the very beginning and talked about them ad nauseum, both of these two are just, they're different, but they're similar. And at the same time, it's, in my opinion, better than anything we've had in that room in a long time. Ben Johnson was good, right? But how much of Ben Johnson was created, right? I guess a good word is created. How much of Ben Johnson was created from what Dan Campbell was feeding him, from what everybody else, Aaron Glenn was feeding him, from Anthony Lynn and everybody else that he's been around while he's been in Detroit. Ben Johnson had one of the most elite cores around him from an offensive personnel standpoint. We lost, 12 or 14 coaches when Ben Johnson left, right? In 2020, 25's offseason, we lost 12 or 14 coaches. Those coaches were more important. Those positional coaches, in my opinion, were all more important than Ben Johnson. The reason why Ben and Dan and everybody else were able to do the things that they were able to do, and the reason why we had such a fall off last year from a coaching perspective, is because we lost so many. That's why. Dan built an amazing cast of coaches, and there wasn't a mass exodus because they wanted to leave Dan Campbell. There was a mass exodus because these coaches either got better jobs or an upgrade in their job, right? Or better job opportunity elsewhere with a team that was starting all over. So their advancement ladder is a lot shorter, right? Not going to go much further in Detroit. I mean, those positions are kind of filled. So I think that when you look at what the Lions brought in, I don't think that you could point at another team that did better. So the quote is by this unnamed source: "The biggest questions with Detroit remain on the coaching staff. Let's see what Petzing and Mike Kafka are able to infuse in terms of better ideas, better execution, more creative play calling, or whatever." I don't know too many executives that would end a statement with, "or whatever." I'm just saying. The Lions absolutely have the talent on offense to take them far and drag the defense kicking and screaming. And drag the defense kicking and screaming there. And so this statement is saying that the Lions have an offense and that our defense is crap, and so the offense is going to pull the defense along. Yeah, I don't think so. The offense greatly lacked those ideas, execution, and creativity from Morton, and to a lesser degree, head coach Dan Campbell after he took over. Yeah, I think Dan Campbell was just trying to maintain the bus from all the rest of the wheels falling off, right? He already had two flats. He didn't want this thing careening off into a crevasse, on 8 Mile or something, just come on. Petzing, along with second-year defensive coordinator Calvin Shepard, may be the two most important people in the Lions organization in 2026. If they end up being more of the same from 25, then no splashy free agency move would carry this team to a deep playoff run. Does anybody realize that Calvin Shepard and that defense, when healthy, was a top 5 defense through the first 8 weeks of the season? Top 5. top 5. So giving him better and more players this year and another year to go through it all, you going to tell me that this defense can't get back to a top 5? We didn't lose that many players that I don't think that we've been able to replace that can't hold the standard down. I think we got better over the free agency period, and I think we're going to get better through the draft as well. So moving forward, it says, much like the players Holmes acquired, the coaches are wait and see. Really? All these players are wait and see? Cade Mays, 0 sacks in 2 years is a wait and see. Rock Ya-Sin played lights out when called upon as a wait and see. Malcolm Rodriguez has always been tough, but he's always been a backup, right? And so let me be clear here too. Every player in the draft is not a starter. And I think some people are beginning to realize what I've been saying for a long time. Every player after the second round is developmental. Every player. You will have a few gems, a few rough diamonds, right? They get polished off and become good players, not usually year 1 or year 2. It could take 3 seasons. But there will be some diamonds in the rough. And those are few and far between. When I look at a draft, I see about, in any draft, 12 to 17 players that are plug-and-play day 1 starters. Players that can help your team advance or be better than where they were the year before. When I look at what's after that, you probably have anywhere between 30 to 45 players kind of rounding out the first and second round. It's not all inclusive of the first and second round. You're going to have some, splashes in other rounds that end up being pretty good that are plug and play backups, right? They can play at some rotational level. You might have a couple more starters in there that end up becoming starters, whether it's the situation that they're put in. Some teams don't have a team, right? They're building a team. And you look at how many coaches were changed this year. What was it, 12 or 14 new head coaches or whatever it was? Some crazy number, 10, 11, 12. That means that you're going to have a lot of roster turnover. So a lot of players in this draft are going to play a lot more snaps than they normally would. That doesn't mean that those are good players. That just means they're holding down a spot until you get 2, 3, 4 drafts deep and 2, 3, 4 free agencies deep to where you've built a team again, kind of like with the Lions. It took us to year 3 to finally make a nice run. But the reason why we made that run is because we had 4 first-round picks taken in 2023. Yeah, 2 of them were second-rounders. Those are first-round picks. That's why we went the distance. Those 4 players helped immediate, played a ton of snaps, and were difference makers. You can't say that about every player that is selected in the first round or the second round. So you have 12 to 17 guys that will plug and play and be immediate starters that can help your team win. And then after that, 30 to 45 guys that are plug and play backups that can play at a high rotational level. Some of them are going to play beyond their means. And then after that, man, it's a crapshoot. And then you have to evaluate every draft based on what the draft is going to give you. Right? Where are you? Like I've had comments in some of my videos like, oh my God, you're still talking about COVID. That is so 2021 or whatever, right? No, it's not. I mean, you're kind of getting into the last year of how COVID affected the drafts, how it affected college players. It's a real thing that I'm not the only one that's talked about that. There's plenty of other analysts that have talked about that. It's a real thing when you look at now the NIL and how that's producing older players in the draft. So older is not a bad thing. Right? If you're getting guys with more experience, that's a good thing. But how does that work out long term? Right? When you draft a guy that's a little bit older, that means the point of emphasis for me would be how much closer are they to their peak or their prime? You might get players that are a little bit closer to their prime. Well, you are really than if you drafted them at 21 years old. If you get some 23-year-olds, they're going to be a year or two closer to their prime level, right? Their body's already aged out from a growth standpoint, and their mental aptitude or the knowledge that they have, the football IQ, it's a lot sharper. So, maybe it only takes them a year, as a second or third rounder to really grasp the NFL and then become a good football player. But that'll still never change that for whatever reason, and I know it's not just our own fan base, but the Lions fan base really believes that every third round pick is supposed to be a starter. Every third round pick is supposed to be just an amazing player. I'll say it again. The Patriots have lost like 12 fourth round picks since 2021. Brad has lost, what, two? I think two. 2 fourth round picks in 5 drafts. The Patriots lost 12. So that means the Patriots just suck, right? They just went to the Super Bowl. So you all need to miss me with all of that garbage, hate-breeding bull crap. It's just unintelligent. People just don't know what they're talking about. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But then again, I look at the players, and I look how they have been playing over the course of their career. And I think that if you go and look at every draft, and I've done this like even with the hotly contested Broderick Martin. When you go look at every defensive tackle that was taken after Broderick Martin, none of them played well through their career. None of them. He was the last defensive tackle, nose tackle of that size. Same thing with Giovanni Manu. Giovanni Manu was the last player of that size that was available in that round, in that draft, and go look at every other offensive lineman after him. None of them have played well. Matter of fact, I just did it the other day as I put it in a post. I think there was a combined 945 snaps with all tackles that were taken after Giovanni Manu. So think about that. 945 snaps, and I think it was like 8 players or 7 players taken after Giovanni Manu. I think it was an average of 90 snaps a year, or maybe it was 45 snaps a year. One of those two numbers. Either way, that's what you got out of every player selected after Giovanni Manu. Giovanni Manu got that in one game. 45. So, again, do your research. People just like to talk crap and throw Brads into the shitter because they don't understand football. They honestly don't understand how the draft works. They don't understand how roster building really works at an NFL level. What they understand is either Madden or they understand really not much. I mean, a lot of people play Madden and they think that Madden is going to teach them everything. No, it doesn't. Not even close. I mean, you're operating with, I can do whatever I want in a game. I can buy my way in and build this team. That's not realistic. It's just not realistic. I know there's a lot more other factors to it when you play online with all these other people and it's kind of a real life situation, but then again, it's really not. It's not even close. And I think that that's what you get from a lot of people, a lot of fans, a lot of content creators, a lot of journalists that they just started doing this, that they have not taken the approach of research. They have not taken the approach to learn the game from the inside out. They haven't asked the questions. Ask the questions. How do you really approach roster building? Why? Why do you do it this way? Why do all the other teams do it this way? Or they don't? Why do they do it a little differently? And you're going to get a lot of the same answers back. So the people that continue to throw heated darts at Brad Holmes, they have failed to recognize that we have 18 players on this team now that are all Pro Bowl type players that have either been drafted or have been brought in through free agency. Or maybe it's 12. I think it's 12. God, I've gone through so many numbers. I've gone through so many things. I've researched so many things. They kind of all blend together at the end of the day sometimes. But I think it's 12. But our core is at least 18 to 20 players that you couldn't really replace with anybody in free agency without spending a boatload of money. And even then, that's not always the answer, right? Because those players don't always work out. We can do the research again another day, or I'll do it another day. So to finish up with what this article was saying, I know it's been a long article, a long dissection of the article, and I was at the end. It says that the Lions entered last season as one of the Super Bowl favorites and fell flat on their face to a 9-8 record. With vibes not as high as this offseason, maybe this season will have the opposite result. If not, then executives are going to have a lot more to say about the Lions next offseason. What does that even mean? So are they saying, like, if we have a great season this year that executives aren't going to say as much about the Lions? Well, so far we've seen one, right? There's one, apparently there's one out of all these executives that feel that maybe the Lions had an underwhelming offseason. And I would say if you can only find one example, and that's all you were able to come to the table with was one example, I think you got a little bit more work to do. Because the Lions have done a much better job than what people are giving them credit for. All right, I'm going to take a brief break. When we get back, we're going to go into a couple more articles, and then I'm going to dip into the chat and see kind of what you guys are talking about. Be right back.
Pressured by Hutchinson, he goes down again.
All right, sorry about that. Had dog duty there. And I'm freezing, man. It is cold in here today. So let's see what the chat's talking about. I still want to talk about Dexter Lawrence here. Is that a fit? Is it not a fit? I don't even know what he's making. What else? Kadyn Proctor. We're going to talk about Kadyn Proctor for just a moment. And C.J. Allen. C.J. Allen. Let me just get this lined up here. Come on. I really can't stand this site called Heavy. Like I don't know where this site came from. Where like I know it's been around for a little bit. But, man, they print so much garbage. It's not even funny. I have a feeling like there's, like it's a ghostwriter. And it might be a local writer that, because it's very similar writing style. Very similar. I might have to throw it to AI to see if it's the same writing style as somebody else. Anyway, so we'll talk about CJ Allen. We're going to talk about Kadyn Proctor and Dexter Lawrence. We'll do Dexter Lawrence first. But first, I want to jump into the chat here. As soon as I can get it open. I'm going to roll back a little bit here. We've been talking about the Lions offseason. Is it underwhelming? Is it not underwhelming? I put up a poll this morning asking you guys, what is your number one draft target so far in the first round? And it's O-line at 69%, safety at 10%, edge at 16%, linebacker at 4%. So I would agree that O-line is extremely important. But, man, I'm even hearing, obviously we've heard the reports on Kadyn Proctor, which we'll roll to in just a few, but and I wouldn't be surprised if that is the pick, but the other side of this is that, are the Lions really valuing offensive line first? I want to talk about that too. Does that really have to be the first pick in this year's draft? Answer 14, that looks like a new name. Welcome in this morning. Glad you could be with us here on Rise and Grind Morning Show. Says, I believe there has been improvement across a number of positional groups. That is exactly what offseason is about, right? We are better on defense and offense. Not glamour, but grit. Hell yeah.
That's a big-time play.
That's a big-time play, my man. Good call there. Sleepy Exotic says 5 of 9 draft picks make the team, whether 53 or practice squad. 5 of the 9 draft picks make the team, whether 53 or practice squad. That's a big call, man.
Balls loose on the ground.
Got 4 balls loose on the ground that ain't making it to this team. Nick P says, I look at results. I'm not going on potential. Turner is 27, and his production is what it is. He has to prove me wrong. I think it's great that we all look at production. I think you know what I do every day. I mean, that's just what I look at. I look at production. I look at stats. I look at, from an analytical standpoint, who is the individual. And I'll dip into Peyton Turner another day. I do want to prepare some things and talk about him a little bit more, and maybe that'll help us understand. At least it'll help me understand. I don't care what anybody else gets out of it. Hopefully they get something out of it, but we're always going to agree to disagree. When I look at every player, whether it is a free agent or whether it's a draft pick, I'm going to ask you this. Nick P. When you look at draft picks, incoming draft picks, or incoming prospects, I should say, a lot of them have injuries, right? A lot of them don't have production. If you were to go compare the production of an incoming rookie to a Peyton Turner, what would you come up with? I think that's how you have to look at free agency. Am I able to go into the draft and find a player that is better than this player? Well, how would I know that? That player's never played in the NFL. But if I look at the draft and I'm about to draft a player that has similar injury history, because a lot of them have injuries, it is what it is, it's football, or production, then what am I missing? What risk am I really taking by signing a player to a vet minimum deal that has multiple years experience already in the NFL? You see how I spin that on you there? Are you really taking that big of a risk? You're not. There is zero risk in Peyton Turner. Zero. Does that mean he's the answer to the edge? Nope. Is DJ Wanham the answer to the edge? Nope. But DJ Wanham carries a $3 million risk. Peyton Turner, $1.2 million risk. And an incoming rookie is going to be as much risk or more, depending on where you select them. How many first-round talents have not worked out? Plenty. How many second-round talents haven't worked out? A lot more than plenty. How many third- and fourth-round prospects haven't worked out? Almost all of them. 15% or less will start a game in the NFL or ever play. So I think that when you look at free agency, I think that if you look at it from that lens, that am I able to get a better player in the draft than what I am in free agency? And how does that look in week 1? You can't answer anything about the draft because you don't know. Right? You say you base it on history, right? You base it on the production. Production from college to the NFL never translates. It just doesn't. Sometimes you have some of the most productive players in college that come into the league and they're just not productive at all, statistically speaking. But they might be productive in other ways that don't make it. It doesn't make it to the clipboard. So I would just that's how I look at it. That's how I look at it. Not for every pick, not for every player, but that's how I look at it. Adam says he is just ready for football to start again. Me too, man. Me too. Why is Adam green? Adam's supposed to be blue. K-Biz says, I love that old school lettering. They used to have it in the end zone and the old school Prowling Lion logo. Oh, you talking about the jacket? Yeah. I got this at Costco last year, of all places. Actually, I got 2 jackets from there. I got an old starter style of a jacket and this jacket. It'd be interesting to see. This one actually fits good. It'd be interesting to see what they come out with this year. I got to get my dad a new jacket. I've gotten him a couple of jackets, and this is a starter one too. You don't really see starter around a whole lot. Bill T. Rowland, good to see you, Bill, says Gio redshirted a year, played 1 game where he gave up 2 sacks to Hendrickson and no other pressures. Then he had a season-ending injury. That doesn't make him a bust. Dude, 1,000%, man. 1,000%.
Lions show 4 across the front.
Maybe that one wasn't good enough.
Straight down the field to the end zone.
Manu has a long way to go. Okay? He has a long way to go. And I've been a huge supporter of Manu from day one. And matter of fact, Trace is the one that put Manu on my radar back when we were talking about the draft in that year. And she hit it right on top of the head, man. She hit the nail square. Like, Manu was the absolute best player you could take, given the situation the Lions were in. Here's what a lot of Lions fans don't recognize. At least I'll say I feel like they don't recognize it. Was Manu supposed to be a starter? Answer that question. Is every player you draft supposed to be a starter? Because if that's how you view the draft, then I really don't believe you understand the draft or roster building or what a team's trying to do. Why would you draft Manu? And at that time, Taylor Decker, I believe, had 2 years on his contract, and then they re-signed him to an extension that essentially gave him, 3 years total? I think it was 3 more years, so he had 25, 26, 27 was left on his deal when he signed the extension. I could be wrong, but the point is Taylor Decker had multiple years still left on his contract. Why was Manu brought in? Was he brought in to be a day one starter at left tackle or right tackle? Nope. You had Penei Sewell and he had Taylor Decker. But can you take a player like that, which, again, all players are developmental. It's just some players, whether it be the second half of the second round, all of the third round beyond, are a lot more developmental. Every single one of these players has a long way to go. You brought in Giovanni Manu to grow for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And then eventually, when Taylor Decker was going to retire, maybe that player would be ready to step into a starting role. Well, Decker just squashed the bug, man. Everything just got screwed up. So Decker's no longer there. And people are looking at Manu like, man, he hasn't done anything. He's been injured and then didn't play his first year, so he's a bust. The Lions should have never drafted him. No, They drafted the perfect player at the perfect position to fit a need for the future. That's not a developmental issue. It's not a bust player. The same thing was with Broderick Martin. Broderick Martin was drafted behind DJ Reader, who had 2 years left under his contract. Just signed it to be a developmental player that was supposed to work in to becoming a better football player. Just didn't work out for him. That injury didn't suit him well. And then honestly, Broderick Martin, I think, was a little soft. He didn't appear to put in the work. And honestly, I think Isaiah Buggs he put that dude into a wrong, like the wrong trajectory. I think Isaiah Buggs infected his brain. Because that's who was training him in the beginning. It was Isaiah Buggs. So not all of these players are brought in to be day one guys. That's like saying we drafted Dan Jackson in the 7th round to go take over for Kirby or Brian Branch. Like, come on, people. The 7th round draft pick. They're lucky to even sniff a roster. And especially when your roster is as grown as what the Lions is right now, it is highly unlikely that a lot of these players are going to even make the roster. Let's see. Robbie says, what if Philly fans called for Jordan Mailata's head because he didn't start for 2 years? Never saw the field for 2 seasons. Now he's one of the best left tackles. Why not Manu? Same scenario. Well, different players. Obviously, we know that. Mailata, I think we're miles apart, but to your point, it's the same point, right? Manu was brought in to develop. Mailata was brought in to develop. There's some major differences between those two players. I think that Mailata is a little bit more of a mean streak type of player, but he developed fast and he was given an opportunity to go out there and play. If Manu hadn't been injured in that game, I think that maybe the table is set a little bit differently right now, because I think that then Manu would have had an opportunity to play more so than what he did. And maybe we would have seen more growth out of him. And so now entering year 3, I think that's kind of where everything meets. And Manu is up against it because his season was derailed by an injury. And even though it's not his fault, right? You're going to come to a point in a roster where if that player has not reached the developmental stage that you expected within that given time frame, and let's just say Brad Holmes brought in Manu and said, you got 2 years. We're going to give you 2 years. That's it. You're going to redshirt your first year. You're going to learn. The next season, you need to take leaps and bounds. Your body needs to get right. Your technique needs to get better. And what we saw in that first game is wide hands, right? Anchor was a little bit slow. And so there's a lot more work, but it was his first game. He had first game jitters, all that stuff. So you can't penalize the guy. Now, in the second game, if we saw one and a lot of that stuff started to smooth out, then I think his natural ability in that body and everything starts to take over. We didn't see that either. So now entering year 3, I think with the amount of competition, if you will, that is being brought in, and with the draft the way that it is, and there's a lot more right tackles available than left, and a lot more interior guys or tackles that could slide in, I think that now Manu is up against it, developmental-wise. Like, he really has to show this season that he has it for him to have a real opportunity of making the roster this year. And it kind of sucks, right? That injury, I think, could have done him in if he doesn't make the roster this year. I would blame it on the injury and not so much the player, because I think that there's going to be another team that picks him up, and then he could end up flourishing, right? And then that would be a big mistake by Brad Holmes. And I think that would be a much bigger mistake. So I could see it now, right? Lions fans are like, oh, he's a bust. And then he goes to another team and he ends up being a great left tackle or a great right tackle. They're like, fire Brad Holmes, you got rid of Manu. It's going to be the same people that are saying he's a bust. You know what I mean? But, yeah. I think every year you're gonna have some developmental guys, whether they're true developmental guys or not. Every single one of those guys has a long way to go. Long way to go. John DeSa says, Will, do you see the Lions taking a guard in the first round if one of the top guards drop? Yes, I do. Said it yesterday. I think I said it in yesterday's video about Kadyn Proctor. If one of the top guards in this draft, oh shoot, if Loney or Neone, excuse me, if he were to drop, then yeah. And I seen him drop, with what draft was that? I think I did a draft the other day. Might have been yesterday. I did a draft and he dropped for whatever reason. He dropped right to us at 17. If you look at the top guards, you've got Oliva Vega Neone. I mean, he's it. Outside of that, it's Emmanuel Pregnan. The guard draft this year is even lighter than the tackles. But I think, some of these players, some of these tackles are going to be moved inside. I know that Francis Maui Noah is, a clear tackle with some team. But I've also heard where some teams are interested in moving him into guard. And if you move him into guard, he's all pro instantly. I think the same thing, could end up happening to guys like, Blake Miller. I've heard it with Kadyn Proctor. Kadyn Proctor, I think, would be an instant all-pro guard. You'd probably want to see him slim down a little bit more. But, man, that wide frame next to a left or a right tackle, you just maul everybody. Your run game would just be insane. But Maxi Hanachor, who's listed as a tackle, I would say he's probably one of the number one guys to move inside to guard. And that could be pure developmental stage for him, just to kind of learn the game, learn the offensive line at the NFL level, and then move him back outside. I know it doesn't sound right, but you could see a guy like him go from guard to right tackle to left tackle, or just guard to right tackle. And we're going to find out today at 3 p.m. I put in a lot of questions to Jeff Dean about Lions fits, of course, and I also want to know. Which players have a potential to move positions, and why, and who are the true left tackles in this draft and why. So I have questions like that into him. So he'll break it down, and then we're going to do edge after that with another NFL scout for SIS, and his name is Nathan Cooper. So we're going to have multiple guys on. The goal is to try to do as many as we can between now and the draft. And super appreciative of them giving me their time to do this. So I'm excited about it. But yeah, to your point, yeah. I mean, if there's a guard still there, like if Neone somehow drops, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to make your team the best it possibly could? I know that would ignore right or left tackle, but like I said last night, I have heard that the Lions may not be 100% on taking a tackle in the first round. Like, there may be better value and upside later. I got to be honest. I don't care about value. I really don't. I don't really care about upside. To a degree, depending on the position. When it comes to what the Lions really need right now, I just want the best player possible at that position. That doesn't mean I'm going BPA. I really want the best player available at the position of need, and it's a blending of the two theories. And so if you're thinking, yeah, you know what, I could trade back, I could pick up, pick 40, and if Monroe Freeling, or Caleb Lomu was there at pick 40, well, that would just be great value. Okay. Might be great value, but you're talking about a left tackle that did not perform extremely well, was kind of middling, and in my opinion, is probably an end of the second round type of player. There's so many more players that I would put in front of him. You know, he may be well built. He may have an opportunity to compete in the very beginning. He's light. And that's what I see with almost everyone. We're going to find out again later today. I'm going to ask that question too. Why does it appear to me that a lot of these tackles in this draft are light in their anchor, in their set, right? Movable versus immovable. I see a lot of that happening. But anyway, we'll see what happens. Robbie wants to know, what percent do you think we trade up or trade down in the first round? Oh, man. Look, if Kadyn Proctor's the pick, if he's the pick, then I would put 75% odds the Lions move up 4 spots. If Kadyn Proctor's not the pick, or if the Lions feel like he's going to be mid-20s, I'm going to put a 75% chance that the Lions move down. But probably not much further than 24. Like, you know, I want to stay in front of the Bears. I think if the Bears get a swipe at Kadyn Proctor, they're going to take it. And then again, I hate to say it, but if the Lions move back and you are able to grab that extra pick that they desperately need inside the top 60, then you may miss out. And that's why I think I'm hearing the Lions are not necessarily tied to any one of these tackles, because there's not a true left tackle outside of Kadyn Proctor and you know, more so outside of Maui Noah. Like, those are the true blues in this draft, in my opinion. Outside of those guys, Monroe Freeling, Blake Miller, Caleb Lomu, I don't think that Blake Miller's a right tackle anyway. You may not need to necessarily do a whole lot there. And if the Lions are completely tied to moving Penei Sewell to the left, you don't need to take a tackle in the first round. Because if you can move up, if they can somehow drop back and add that early day 2 pick, early second round pick, then you're going to get a tackle. You're going to get a right tackle in the second round. And that's where the value play comes in. And again, you'd have to be tied to putting Penei Sewell to the left side. I don't necessarily believe the Lions are tied. I think they set it, and I think that they put out the smoke and mirrors, and they want people to believe that they're going after a right tackle. And that's what they want people to believe. We'll see what they do. All right, we got a couple of players to talk about here. Now, in this next article, as soon as I can get it pulled up. In this next article, and this is again by that heavily full of crap. They say that Pro Football Focus's Dyer Carragher projected that the Lions are going to move down in the first round. I've kind of been thinking that for a while. That yet had the Lions still grabbing one of the top prospects of the draft. And after moving down 6 spots, they pick up C.J. Allen in the first round. I got to be honest. I've heard nothing but bad things about C.J. Allen. And he's a middle linebacker. Why would you bring in a middle linebacker after trading back and then taking him in the first round? That would make 0 sense to me, that you would bring in another middle linebacker. For what reason? Are you getting rid of Jack? Are you just going to bring in a middle linebacker that's then going to sit? Or unless you're going to a 3-4 defense, then that would make sense that you need another interior linebacker. I don't see the Lions making that switch. They may have some plays drawn up, but yeah, I don't see it. Here's the quote. The Lions trade down six spots and draft a player they have reasonably selected. Hold on. The Lions trade down 6 spots and draft a player they could have reasonably selected had they stayed put. Linebacker may not be the biggest need for Detroit. Well, it kind of is. But this organization places a premium on high character players who bring energy and enthusiasm. That's the basis for the Lions dropping back and selecting Allen. He goes on to say that, quote, Allen wore the green dot on Kirby Smart's defense, and coaches rave about his leadership ability. He has graded as an outstanding run defender over the past 2 seasons, earning a PFF run defense grade above 88 in each year. Lance Zierlein raved about Allen's tenacity and leadership abilities, stating, quote, green dot linebacker and team captain, more capable of rowing the boat than making big splashes. Allen plays with toughness and control, sorting through run fits with patience and leverage in pursuit. Allen is a dependable starting Mike backer who raises the floor of a defense. So there's the problem. We don't need another Mike backer. And this is not a guy that is going to go out and become a Will or a Sam, especially with his tight hips. So do the Lions trade back 3 spots, 6 spots, whatever it is, and bring in a middle linebacker? I don't think so. I don't see it. I don't see it. It doesn't make sense. What's that tool? I need that tool. I need that tool for my corn. Whatever it does, I need it. In the middle of the Lions defense, Allen could pair with inside backer and former first-rounder Jack Campbell. The two could create a formidable duo to lead the Detroit defense for years to come. Now, in the 2-backer set, which the Lions do play, I'd say a mean amount of 2-backer sets, then, yeah, it could make some sense to bring in another middle linebacker as opposed to an outside linebacker. But then again, one of those guys has to be able to cover. You have to. Whenever you have a running back or a tight end that's, coming across your face, you got to pick them up. And I don't see C.J. Allen being able to pick up many. We did bring in DJ Wonnum, who can play the outside backer position. He can also play up on the line. And we also brought in Damone Clark, who his coverage is not shabby, man. His coverage is not shabby at all. It goes on to say that if the value at these positions doesn't exist for the Lions, Allen could be in play. And what they were talking about is offensive line or edge if the value's not there. But it appears to be a much safer bet that the Lions address one of their biggest needs than to add a Georgia linebacker. Don't you love the clickbait and then it ends kind of with, yeah, but they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. It would make more sense to go in a different direction. You got to love it. You got to love it. No conviction. No conviction in what they're writing. Just writing to write. That's craziness to me. I don't see it. Look, I think CJ is going to be a middle backer in a 3-4 scheme. I think that's what he's going to be. And I don't see him going anywhere but that. I mean, he could be a middle backer in a 4-3 scheme. But I think that he pairs better next to somebody in the middle. Now, Kirby Smart's defense, I got to look something up real quick because there was just some recent news. Let me move my screen here. There's something that goes with this. I got to find it real quick. I forgot to pull it up this morning. I might not find it in time. there was some other news that the Lions were exercising, or I guess putting a couple of players through drills at pro days. And it might have been the U of M backer. Hold on. Yeah, so it says here that they had Michigan's Jyshawn Barnham. They asked him about playing Sam backer. And then Michigan State's edge rusher Quindarius Dunnigan, had they had him go through linebacker drills at his pro day. So, that tells me that's really late in the draft and or UDFA. I don't think Quindarius Dunnigan is going to be drafted. And he was an edge rusher for State. He played extremely well. Like, I think he did just fine at State. But he's not a premium edge rusher. And, yeah, he may project a little bit as a smaller edge that could maybe move back to outside backer. But I guess my biggest question is, whoops, I just lost my sheet. Oh, why does it keep doing that? Come on, stop. Ever since I added these new 4K screens, man, it's really, really screwed everything up. Like, they really don't like. Come on. When they move screens, like, it changes the size. It's probably something I didn't set up right. Try it one more time. There we go. Let me get back to what I was going to say here. Number one, Kirby Smart's defense is a 3-4 defense. Yeah, it's a modern, adaptable 3-4 scheme. So that's why when I say I see CJ Allen kind of fitting that scheme a little bit more, it's based on. Oh man, now my chat's all extra big. It's based on, there it goes, what he's done at the college level, and I think how he projects, moving to the next level at the NFL. And then when you look at what the Lions lost, we lost a will linebacker. Why would the Lions, and I get it, you want to exercise backers out to do a different, a different style of a position, but why would the Lions be looking for a Sam linebacker? Hold on one sec. One sec, guys. Okay, sorry about that. I had to take a quick call. So I guess I really don't understand where, the Lions would be working out another Sam linebacker, or asking players to change positions like that when we really need a will linebacker because that's who we lost. Now, unless the Lions are considering trading, Derek Barnes, then I really don't understand that part, because there's many options for the Lions. Many options for the Lions in this draft to find their next Sam backer. I'd say there's probably more Sam backers in this draft that could be available than there would be will linebackers. I think the will linebacker position in this draft is pretty slim. There's going to be a few early, and then it's a nosedive. Like the later round guys, definitely going to be rotational backup guys. So I don't see it. I don't see C.J. Allen. I'm not saying that he's not a good player. I'm not saying that he can't end up in Detroit, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't bring him in to become a very good backup to Jack Campbell and potentially be that rotational player that comes in their 2 backer sets. I'm not saying that. I think all those things could work, but a first round pick, I don't see that. I don't see them wasting a first round pick on a player at a position, that they already have locked down. I haven't seen anyone talking about C.J. Allen moving outside, especially after his pro day. Like, his pro day was not great. So there's that. Next up, let's talk about Dexter Lawrence. Austin Botch 313. If you put your questions in all caps, it'll help me see it a little bit better, but I'll wind back. Wants to know what my thoughts are on Messidor. I'm going to give you the very, very easy answer on Messidor. I like him. Okay. When we think about players that are older and what they're bringing to the table year one, it is high floor. These are guys that are going to come in and they're going to be able to help your team immediately. When you're looking at other guys, that are younger, maybe have a little bit more upside to their game, they're going to take a little bit longer to fully develop. Messidor's fully developed, right? He had 6 seasons in Miami? I think 6 full seasons. He's 25 years old. I get it. That turns a lot of people off, but he's a player that you're going to have from 25 to 29. He's a one contract kind of guy. He may never get that second massive contract because he's so much older. He's going to be a guy that when he gets through his first rookie deal, he's going to renegotiate after 3 years, most likely if he's playing well, but he's probably never going to get that pinnacle of the big contract numbers. He might end up being, the 1 year contract kind of a guy that's going to get decent money, unless there's a team that is willing to invest in him at age 29 or 30. I think that's going to be the hardest thing for him coming out so late. And then there's the foot injury thing. He's had a couple of surgeries on his feet, and that's a bit of a concern because, your feet are the most important part of your game. But if all that stuff is good, and if all of his medicals check out, and they feel confident, then I would say if you bring in a player like Messidor, he helps your team win now, because I think he's going to be able to play at a higher level than some of the younger guys, especially some of the younger guys that are going to go earlier that you're not going to get a chance on getting. And Messidor still may go in the first round, and he may go top 15, I've seen, but he could also go end of the first round or early day 2. It really depends on the medicals, and we don't have an update on medicals. We don't have anything at all. I can only base it on the film and his play and everything else, and I see him as a first-round pick. I probably wouldn't take Messidor at 17, but then again, if the Lions are in win-now mode, which a lot of fans believe that they're in this window, then taking a player like Messidor makes a lot of sense. Because then, again, like I've said, he's going to help you win now. And we still have Ahmed Hassanin to worry about, and I get it. He's a 6th-round pick, and a lot of people are saying, you brought in Ahmed Hassanin, he hasn't played. What has he done? He's only been on the team for a year, and he got injured. He's a 6th-round pick. Highly unlikely these players even making the roster anyway. But we don't know what Ahmed's going to do. We have no idea what type of player he is still. I'm not resting my hat there, but I am still excited to see what he turns out to be. Just because he was a 6th-round pick doesn't mean he can't end up being a good football player. But that doesn't mean I'm ignoring the edge position for players like Messidor that could help me win now? I can't answer that question, Robbie. Not right now. That'll come out closer to the draft. Certain things I will hold close to the vest. Yeah, and I see see where you said like Allen can play outside like Alex Anzalone. I would 100% disagree, and I think every other analyst would too. Allen's way too tight hipped. Way too tight hipped. All right, so let's talk about, of course, the most interesting information that popped up. Was it yesterday? I think it was released by Adam Schefter that Dexter Lawrence has reached an impasse with. Hold on a sec. So Major Payne, make sure you're not in the comment section. Sometimes that happens where you end up in the comment section, not the actual live chat section. I haven't even seen you in here yet. But anyway, good morning. Fire away. Dexter Lawrence, man. Let me pull this one up. So Dexter Lawrence apparently has reached an impasse with the Giants and is now wanting a new home. He wants to be traded. So here's the quote. It says, New York Giants defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence requested a trade, and he will not be participating in the team's offseason workout program that begins Tuesday. League sources told ESPN, and Adam Schefter reported that Lawrence and the Giants have been through 2 off seasons attempting to negotiate a contract reflecting his value to the team over the past 3 years. But there has not been any progress per sources. This one's interesting, right? Because who's now the head coach out there? They have a new head coach, Harbaugh. And so Harbaugh's probably looking at this from the standpoint of, man, these ads are terrible. Probably looking at this from the standpoint of, I'm not going to heavily invest into a player right now, and he's probably thinking he's going to do something in the draft, and he's probably going to reset that position for the future. So apparently this individual said that in order for Detroit to be able to afford the talented defender, they would likely be forced to restructure the contracts of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell. You think? That's the only way. This toxic individual goes on to say that Detroit's front office has made it clear that they want to remain fiscally responsible given that the players are expecting contract extensions this offseason. That's not a surpriser either. Parting ways with McNeil would tack on approximately $8.4 million owed on this year's salary cap. According to this toxic individual, says it is not supremely prohibitive, but not the strategy Holmes has made in his tenure as GM. So if essentially what I'm gathering here is, you want to trade? You want to trade Aleem McNeil and bring in Dexter Lawrence? Is that what we want to do? How does that make any sense? How much is Dexter Lawrence worth right now? How much is he worth and how much is he making? All right, his current contract, which he's 28 years old, by the way, 28 and a half years old, roughly. His current contract has him signed through 2027 with the Giants. His base salary this year is $18.5 million. His total cap hit is $27 million. I don't know what the heck Dexter Lawrence is thinking here. You're telling me that you believe that you're worth more than $27 million? And next year, it's right around the same amount, $27 million, 26.5 is his overall cap hit with a base salary of 15.5. So he's probably looking to cash in now before he gets too old, being that he's under contract for 2 more seasons. He'll be 30 years old by the time he could potentially be a unrestricted free agent. And by that time, yeah, he's probably not going to get a big deal given the fact that he'll be 30 years old. If you look at his statistical output over the last few years, 2025 was a solid, year, but only 1 sack. Here you have a lot of fans up in arms over Lee McNeil in his production last year, right? And Dexter Lawrence, and a lot of people want Dexter Lawrence. He had 1 sack. 1. 32 tackles, 15 of which were solo. He ended up pulling an interception down. No forced fumbles. 2024 was a breakout year for him. 9 sacks. Now, what have I always said about players that have amazing statistical outputs? Like Kirby Joseph. Probably never going to happen again, right? Especially the next year. Extremely rare that a player would double back and have an extremely good season like that. Well, same thing for Dexter Lawrence here. He had 9 sacks in 2024 and then follows that up with 1 sack. He only played in 12 games in 24. He played in 17 games in 25. So you would have thought that he would have had a better year statistically in 25 because he played in more games and he played in 17% more snaps than he did in 2025. So all things pointing to he should have had a much better statistical output in 25 versus 24. Now, throughout his career, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons. He's had 18, 27, 28, 33 sacks. Which he averages just shy of 5 a year, about 4.7 sacks per year. And that is right where a defensive tackle probably should live, right? A defensive tackle that's not a nose tackle, but a defensive tackle that has some pass rush upside should live in that 3 to 6 sack a year area. And that's where he's averaged is about 4.7 sacks per year. I can't see where he's worth more than what he's making right now. I don't see it. So then we look at like, okay, who's the top paid defensive tackle in the league currently? Chris Jones is making $31.8 million. Milton Williams is making $26 million. Zach Allen is making $25.5. Matabuiki is making $24.5. Ali McNeil is making $24.25. Derek Brown, $24. Quinnen Williams, $24. Jeffrey Simmons, $23.5. Dexter Lawrence, $21.8. That number's not right according to what Spotrac has in their other area. But if we were to go look at some of these players and their statistical output, let's take a look at. Let me see if I can get some of this up on the screen here. Let's take a look at some of these other players. All right, so if we were to compare Dexter Lawrence to the number 1 overall or highest paid defensive tackle Chris Jones will be 32 years old when the season starts. What do you do in 2025? 7 sacks. 7 sacks, 29 tackles, 15 solo, no interceptions, no fumbles. I mean, he's kind of lived in that area, right? He's lived in that area all throughout his career. 5 in 24, 11 in 23. 16 was his breakout year in 2022. 16 again in 2018. But between that time, he's averaged, how many years is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So over 10 years, he's probably averaged about 8 sacks a year, maybe 9. And sacks are not, like, that's not the end-all, be-all for a defensive tackle. And I think it also depends on what type of defense you're playing. Yeah, he's averaged 9 sacks a year. The Chiefs have primarily operated out of a 4-3. And I don't have their splits as far as how often they're in a 3 defensive tackle look or rolling 5, and going heavy. But clearly Jones has been the number 1 overall defensive tackles. He's making, a boatload of money. Uh-oh. Got to go to the rest. Let me just open up a new one. There we go. I don't have to worry about it. All right, Milton Williams. What did he do last year after leaving Philly and going to New England? 4 sacks. 5 the year before, 1 the year before that, 4, and then 2. 29 tackles. So a lot of these guys, they're in that very similar 29 and 15 range, 30 and 15. Milton Williams had it. Chris Jones had it. Dexter Lawrence had it. Go back down to Dexter Lawrence. Go to his stats. 32 and 15. Now, Lee McNeil, he didn't play much last year. But even with his limited amount of play in 10 games, he still had 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 14 tackles in 10 games, 5 solo. And if you look at his statistical output year over year, since 2023, I mean, he was on the rise. He was only averaging about 50% of the snaps, was averaging, between 23 and 24, 4.5 sacks a year. If he would have played a full season and was fully healthy last year, he would have been in that same range. So my question is, when you look at Lee McNeil and you compare him to the other players that are out there, and he's a young player, right? He's only been in the league 5 seasons, entering year 6. And he's the, 11th highest paid? No, where's the lean? 5th highest paid, excuse me. 5th highest paid in the league. How does he compare to the rest? Well, Madubuike had one extremely good year in 2023. He's racked up a bunch of tackles. And I'm trying to remember. Anyway, he's racked up a bunch of tackles. I think they run a 3-4 in Baltimore, which would lend to why he has more tackles, right? 3-4, if you have 3 across the defensive line, you're going to have more of an opportunity to get a tackle than if you have 4. It's just numbers. It's a numbers game. I'd be willing to bet, without even knowing this answer, that 3-4 defensive tackles are going to have more tackles per year than a 4-3 defensive tackle. So he may not be the best example to weigh against the Lee McNeil, but at the same time, if you remove 2023 season, how much different or better is Madubuike than a Lee McNeil? He's not getting a bunch more fumbles or interceptions. His tackles are a little bit more. right? But you remove this 1 year of 13 sacks. That's an outlier. That's a total outlier. Matter of fact, I think Lee McNeil started with 1 and 2 in his first 2 years and then shot up to 6 and then down to 5 or shot up to 5, then 6, whatever. It was back and forth. Or 4, then 5. And then down to 1 because he only played in 10 games. All right, how about Zach Allen from Denver? Another 3-4 defense. Another 3-4 defense. Look at all those tackles. A lot more tackles per year because he's in a 3-4 defense. And he's averaging what? What is that? About 5.5, maybe 5 sacks per year. Let's go 7, 9, 5, 6, 3, 2, and 0. So 7 seasons, 4.5 sacks a year. Exactly what Lee McNeil is averaging when he's playing in a full season. He's played pretty much in a full season. We could even remove that first year because he only played in 4 games. We'll divide it by 6. He's averaging 5.3 sacks per year. Now, sacks is not the overall number, right? That's not the number that I care about when I'm looking at defensive tackles. I more or less, I care about their splits and, what are they doing in the run game? What is their run defense looking like? But we've gone through multiple players now, and I'd have to tell you, from my opinion, statistically speaking, Lee McNeil is right where he needs to be. Statistically speaking, you comparing him against all these other players, this is a crazy number. The Derek Brown had 103 tackles in 2023. Like that is nuts. Don't even know how that's possible. But it happened. He has 73 last year. And they run a hybrid 3-4 too, right? I'm pretty sure they do. If you guys know in the chat, let me know. I'm almost positive they're a 3-4 out there. Oh, I forgot to add something to my blocker. Trying to go back to the chat here and see if there's anything in here. Let's see. Oh, hey, it's Jessica says, do you think that the Lions, if they stay healthy, they can go all the way? Yes, I do. 100%. If the Lions stay healthy, they're going all the way. If they would have stayed healthy in 2024, I mean, that defense was incredible how deep it was. And even last year, like we had the team, but you have to stay healthy. That's first and foremost with any roster, with any team. That goes the difference. Go look at how healthy they are at the end of the year. And that is a major contributing factor. Last guy we'll look at, let's look at Jeffrey Simmons. Just for comparison. So again, 3-4 defenses are a little bit tough to compare, statistically speaking, because they have a lot more opportunity for tackles at least. And depending on where the pressure's coming from, it can spread the offensive line out, which can give them more of an opportunity as well. Now, the Titans, they run a lot of did they run more like 2-4-5 last year? I think the Titans ran a lot more. I know it sounds crazy, but a 2-4-5 look, and they run a 4-3 hybrid base. And I don't know if they've had any, changes this year, but Jeffrey Simmons, 11 sacks last year. And I don't know where he lined up, but prior to that, 5, 6, 8, 9, 3, 2. I mean, that's a pretty standard average. 8, 9 is pretty high. His tackles are pretty heavy. He stayed healthy for the majority of his career. A few fumbles. He's creating some forced fumbles. But again, you know, you look at Ali McNeil's output, and I'm not overly worried about Ali McNeil and what he's done. I think Tyreek Williams is going to leapfrog him quickly. Tyreek came in a much better player than what Ali McNeil was as a rookie. A much better player. Matter of fact, let's just forget for giggles here. Last few minutes, let's roll through this. Am I forgetting anything else I want to talk about today? Oh, we didn't talk about Kadyn. I got to talk about Kadyn real quick. Kadyn. All right, we'll do that, and then I'll come back to Ali McNeil. All right. Quick break. Be right back. We'll get into Kadyn Proctor.
Pressured by Hutchinson, he goes down again.
Okay, latest reports on the Lions and offensive line, or at least what they're going to do at pick 17. Yesterday there was a report, obviously, that I reported on with a video. Let's see how many times we can say report in 2 minutes. But Daniel Jeremiah was on Mina Kimes, and he had said, you know, during this War Room mock draft at the very end that the Lions love Kadyn Proctor. Now, you guys know that Kadyn Proctor has been my number one fit to the Lions at pick 17 since December. And I really haven't wavered on that. It's just where the Lions are now, you know, post free agency or during free agency, leading up to the draft, and what the players that are going to be available potentially for the Lions at 17 have changed drastically. As we've expected, it's going to change week in and week out. Players move up, players move down. But what doesn't change is who the players are on the board for Brad Holmes. He's put his board together, and I'm sure that as every pro day ends, there could be some adjustments. But the film for Brad and Dan and the rest of that crew over there in the scouting department, they have the board put together in a way that makes sense for them. Who is that player? We're not going to know until the first round of the NFL draft. But leading up to that, there's a lot of speculation, and that is where Tim 20man put out a story yesterday as well, kind of discussing, you know, similar thing here that, you know, there's some options. And he says that there's been a distinct shift over the course of the last few months when it comes to mock draft predictions for the Detroit Lions and their number 17 overall pick, that early in the mock draft season, predictions were pretty split between edge rushers and offensive tackles. I would say here, the people that are taking edge rushers in the first round, you're overvaluing a lot of these edge rushers. Unless you're getting edge rushers that are slipping, I just don't see it. I just don't see where an edge rusher at 17 makes a ton of sense. The latest batch of mocks has the Lions selecting offensive tackle at nearly a 90% clip. It's certainly a need for the Lions heading into the draft. Pittsburgh at the end of the month. So a closer look at the latest round of mock drafts as we kind of kick off the draft month. According to Chad Reuter at NFL.com, Spencer Fano out of Utah, number 13 after a trade with Atlanta. That would have the Lions moving up to go after Spencer Fano. Why? Well, general manager Brad Holmes, once again, trades with his former boss, Les Snead, moving up 4 spots for a fifth-round pick this year and a 2027 third-rounder, despite possessing below-average arm length for a tackle. Fano takes over the right bookend spot for the departed longtime starter, Taylor Decker. Now, that doesn't make any sense to me. The right bookend spot? Well, Taylor Decker was the left tackle. That doesn't make any sense. Now, if they're trying to say that he's taking over at the right spot because Sewell's moving to the left because of the departed Taylor Decker, now that would make more sense. The arm length is always going to be a problem for me. Always. And that's why this tackle class has, I guess, been downgraded a little bit from my perspective. I think that a lot of these guys have great aspects to their game and intangibles and all that good stuff, but the physical stuff like that remains the most important to me, along with the film. And even the film looks good, but at times the film does show some glaring red flags. And Fano definitely has a couple of those. I'm not saying that he's not going to go early, but as a right tackle, I think that it's just as important at left tackle to have the arm length. And maybe Fano is a better, right guard or left guard, and maybe a team would look at him for that reason, and they possibly could. So at pick 50, he's got the Lions taking Anthony Hill, Logan Fano at edge, Brian Parker Jr. at center. Hey, that's funny. I did Brian Parker Jr. last night. I like Brian Parker. Cole Payton at quarterback. I like Cole Payton too. So interesting. We actually agreed on 2 picks here. I like that. Lance Zerline says, Kadyn Proctor, tackle Alabama. Why? This could be a best-case scenario for the Lions if both Proctor, who's a potential left or right tackle, and Olavavega-Nioni, who's a guard, are both on the board. In this case, the Lions take the massive Alabama tackle. Now, I've seen that go the other way with Daniel Jeremiah yesterday, where he would have taken Maui Noah or, Nioni for the Lions. Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 draft prospects. I'm not going to go through all that. Charles Davis, Kadyn Proctor. Why? I've been saying it throughout the process. Proctor just feels like a Lions offensive lineman to me. Bucky Brooks says Akeem Mesidor at edge. Why? The Lions need to find complementary edge to alleviate some of the pass rushing burden on Aiden Hutchinson. Despite his advanced age at age 25 in April, Mesidor is perfect for the role as a high motor defender with a loaded toolbox. Nick Shook, NFL.com, Cassius Howell. That would be the absolute worst pick if the Lions went that direction. Unless he can play outside linebacker. Holmes, here's the reason why. Holmes flouts concerns regarding Howell's arm length at 30 1/4 inches. You think that's a concern? That's a major concern. And chooses a dynamic rusher who is also highly capable of making a difference against the run. Giving the Lions running mate they've needed for Aiden. Look, this guy's not going to be able to tackle NFL running backs running through the hole at a very good clip. With the short arms, he's not going to be able to wrap unless he has a clear hit on you, dead to rights. I think Cassius Howell is going to get eaten alive, honestly. I think that he has some upside in certain areas. I think he'll be great on special teams. I think he'll be great as a rotational specialist. I don't think he's a 3-down guy. And I'm just the arm length. I would run away from it. Blake Miller says Mike Band of NFL.com, the tackle out of Clemson. He says Miller gives the Lions a dependable tackle prospect to help restore the front that has powered this team at its best. Mel Kiper says, Mel Kiper, Matt Miller, Jordan Reed, Field Yates of ESPN. They all predict Monroe Freeling, the tackle out of Georgia. Now, makes a lot of sense when you think about the SEC. Brad definitely has his ties to the SEC between Georgia and Alabama. Now, he says, or they say, regardless of which side Penei Sewell plays, the Lions need a long-term answer at the other offensive tackle spot. I would agree. Freeling started 18 games. That's a big red flag to me. But he's long and quick, but he's also light, and he has a high ceiling, right? The ceiling, that's the biggest problem. I think that you can get away with a guy that has a lot more development if you have a lot more size. And a guy like Kadyn Proctor, who brings size, massive amount of power. He's also quick for his size, I should say. And he's not light in the pants and an anchor. And so when he has more of a ceiling to reach, I think that Kadyn Proctor gives you more just from the simple fact that even if he loses a rep and he allows the defender to get into his chest, you're not going anywhere. Once he locks in, you're done. And he has, pretty close to the requisite arm length. I was surprised to see that Kadyn Proctor's arms were under 34 inches, but his arm length is just fine. Next pick at 50 would be Jyshawn Barham. And they say because Detroit goes down the road to get a sudden defender who is still ascending after moving from linebacker to a full edge rusher role, Barham could help fill the void opposite of Aiden. So Barham, it's still the question, right? Because earlier I mentioned that they were having him do Sam linebacker workouts. Well, why not the Will side? And so he was, a linebacker at Michigan. Then he moved to the edge. So he still possesses the ability to play linebacker. I'm not even sure of what Barham's weight is, but I'm going to have to double check that later. Matt Miller says Monroe Freeling was a one-year starter at Georgia, but has elite traits in terms of movement, size, 6'7", 315, 4.93 speed. He is one of the few proven left tackles with a round 1 grade and has the upside of a higher-end starter thanks to his upper-level athletic skills plus his development over the course of the 2025 season. Next pick would be Malachi Lawrence. Now, Malachi Lawrence, if I remember correctly, he has some injury concerns, previous injury concerns. So there's, that, right, with Malachi Lawrence. I think his upside is great. I think Malachi Lawrence is a solid defensive end, but it's the injury concern. Isn't it kind of funny that Lions fans will take an edge rusher regardless of injury concern, but then they blame Brad Holmes for bringing guys in with injury concerns? Huh. But it's an edge, so it's okay. Huh. Interesting. Very interesting. Ooh, I like Miller. Was this Miller? Yeah, Miller. Look at that. Pick my guy, DeMonte Capehart. I know a lot of you learned about DeMonte Capehart when I shouted him out back during the combine and wrote up a piece on him. And a lot of people have been falling in love with Capehart. He's gonna be a problem at the next level. He needs to be reined in a little bit, but he's gonna be a problem. All right, Field Yates says Kadyn Proctor. And then Gabe Yakus at 50. I think it's a bit early for Gabe Yakus, but you're not going to get him at 118. So it makes sense to take him at 50 unless you can figure out a way to get a pick around 75. I think Gabe Yakas is going to slip a little bit further than that. But if you need the next edge and you're picking for need and not best available, then you're taking the next edge, right? But I would say at pick 50, that's a huge reach. And then that's it, man. Now that's all I'm really going to go through, other than Bruce Feldman thinks Kadyn Proctor. Victor Four says Blake Miller. Nick Binkerhoff says Monroe Freeling. But the overall consensus here is tackle. Kadyn Proctor probably has more votes. Caleb Lomu's also in there a little bit. I would say Lomu in the early second makes more sense. But anyway, I'm going to do a quick comparison when I get back. That's the consensus picks right now on Kadyn Proctor. Of course, I did a little video last night on Kadyn Proctor. Check it out. And look, I think that Kadyn Proctor makes the most sense out of all these guys. But as we move through this process, there might be better options in the second round for a tackle. We're going to talk about that right when I get back.
Pressured by Hutchinson, he goes down again.
All right, sorry about the delay there. Just a quick comparison here on Lee McNeil and Tyleik Williams. I don't think that I've done this yet this year. We've talked about both players quite a bit. Let's see. I really hate using PFF for this, but we're going to do it. Just interesting to see like where Tyleik Williams in his first season compared to Lee McNeil. Lee McNeil being a third round pick ended up becoming one of the better defensive tackles in the league, right? So we're gonna just kind of goodness. It's not letting me do that. It should let me do that, but it's not letting me do that. All right, we're going to have to flip back and forth. No big deal. I was trying to do that side-by-side thing, but just was not working out. All right, so Tyleik Williams, in his rookie year, and Ali McNeil. All right, that's Tyleik. This is Aleem. So we're just interested in 2021. 422 snap counts, 237 against the run, 187 against the pass rush. Pretty similar for Tyleik, 446 again to Ali McNeil's 422. So he outpaced Ali McNeil by 26 snaps or 24 snaps. And it was pretty evenly split, pass rush and run defense. Overall grades is where we'll go to next. Ali McNeil was a 60.1, 55 against the run, 45.8 in tackling, 63.3 in the pass rush, 61.7 in coverage. And then Tyleik Williams, 62.1 against the run, 53.8 in the run defense, 64.2 tackling, 68.2 pass rush, 59.7 run defense. Now, this actually would look a lot better if I could just join these two together. Let me try to do that real quick. There we go. All right, now we got them side by side. Kinda. Why is this one not letting me make it bigger? Huh. It's not letting me make it bigger. All right, well, hopefully you can see that. I certainly can't. Just to do the comparison, run defense. You have Tyleik on the left, Ali McNeil obviously on the right. So Tyleik was better against the run. Better against overall defense. Just slightly behind Ali McNeil against the run by what is that? 1.2. Tyleik was a lot better in tackling by almost 20 basis points. Pass rush, Tyleik was better by 5 basis points. And in coverage, which I don't care about, we'll skip that. Total pressures, Ali McNeil had 10. Tyleik had 19. Ali McNeil had 2 sacks. Tyleik's 1. Ali McNeil had 1 hit. Tyleik had 1. 7 hurries by Ali McNeil. The 17 for Tyleik Williams. 3 batted balls for Tyleik. 1 batted ball for Aleem. 21 tackles. 16 for Tyleik. And missed tackles. Tyleik had 1. Ali McNeil had 4 for a 4.8 missed tackle rate. Ali McNeil was 10% missed tackle rate. And then when you look at stops, Tyleik had 12. Ali McNeil had 18. And that's really about it. Just giving them a comparison based on the quick and dirty of the stats. So overall, Tyleik is a much better player than Ali McNeil was as a rookie. If the trajectory works out the same for Tyleik Williams or better than the way that Ali McNeil kind of graduated through the league, got better year after year, then I would say that Tyleik Williams is going to be a much better football player than Ali McNeil. And is there a big difference between a first and a third round pick? There should be, right? On paper, there should be. Both of these guys had very similar qualities, but I think that Tyleik Williams was the more agile football player. He is quicker on his feet. He has a lot of pass rush upside. And when he came into the league, matter of fact, if we were to compare Aleem McNeil when he came in through the combine, go back and look at his combine and Tyleek's combine. Profile, at least, right? Just their profiles. Aleem McNeil was graded out as a 6.19. And what that means is he was a good backup with potential to develop into a starter. Tyleek, 6.35, will eventually be a plus starter, right? Plus starter. Big difference is Tyleek was drafted in round 1, whereas Aleem McNeil was drafted in round 3, excuse me. What's the difference in height, weight, and all that good stuff? Well, Aleem McNeil, 32 and 5/8 inch arms, 9 and 3/8 inch hands. He was 6'2 and 317. Tyleek, an inch taller. He was about 17 pounds heavier. His hands a little bit bigger by about an inch. His arms about 5/8 inch smaller. Again, depending on who's doing the measurements, right? Pretty much the same player. Tyleek's a little bit bigger. I think this year, from what I've heard, Tyleek is a much different player this year. He's going to come in chiseled, ready to go. Total score for the combine rank for Tyleek was an 80. Aleem McNeil was a 73. Athleticism, Tyleek was a 77. And why his is green? And Aleem McNeil was an 85. His is also green. Production score, Aleem's was down. Tyleek's was up at an 80. Overall, a better player on paper. All right? Better player on paper. I don't see the combine. If I remember, maybe Williams did not test, but I know he did drills. Isn't that nuts? He's compared to Aleem McNeil by Lance Zierlein. That's Tyleek Williams compared to Aleem McNeil. Draft projection was round 2, and that would have been early round 2. But Lance Zierlein said that he was a drain-clogging run defender with violent first contact and nimble feet for impressive tackle production. Williams flashes an ability to play through or around the block. He physically dominates man-on-man matchups, but inconsistent pad level and shorter arms hinder his double-team take-ons. Tyleek was double-teamed like crazy last year. He needs to focus on developing his hands to keep longer NFL guards from getting into him and neutralizing his power. Williams should pressure the pocket from time to time, but might not win on his own enough to see many third down reps. The knockback, pop, and ability to eat up runners in his general vicinity could help him become an impactful run-stuffing 3-tech. Aleem McNeil, according to Lance Zierlein, sawed-off frame that lacks optimal length but carries plenty of base strength and upper body explosiveness. Well, he was longer than Tyleek, right? And most defensive tackles don't have extremely long arms. McNeil lined up over the nose, which did him a bit of a disservice in relation to his athletic traits and overall strengths. He might not have the overall length and mass to withstand the rigors of 2-gapping in the NFL. Well, that's funny. They do 1.5 gap in Detroit. But he does have plus flexibility and fluidity for a big man and should create problems for centers as a shatter nose or as a shaded nose with the ability to attack or counter either A gap. While he's a good athlete and should test well, he's not necessarily cat quick and still relies more on power than first step penetration quickness. He's like a rotational nose early in his career and has a chance to develop into a starter. So if you guys believe everything that you read, and this is Lance Zierlein, who's in every single NFL combine write-up, if you believe everything that you read by these analysts, you will not like anybody. And all of these players that the Lions are taking are trash, right? That's what they say. At least that's what a lot of fans think, because they read what other analysts are saying and they believe it. Instead, go watch the damn film for yourself And if you're not good at that, and if you don't know what you're looking at, then I would read multiple people. But I think what happens, unfortunately, is you get a lot of copy paste. A lot of copy paste. What one person says, a lot of other people say. And they say it a little bit different, but they mean the same thing. I'm not one to do that. And I think a lot of you hopefully respect the fact that I'm never going to be biased about anything. At least I try not to be. Hell, I don't even really like to look at anybody else's top 50 or top 100. Dane Brugler is about the only thing that I'll look when the Beast comes out, and I'll really go through that. We've gone through a couple of the other top 50s, like Daniel Jeremiah this year, just going through things. But when I do my pieces, man, I do them without the influence of anybody else, because if I were to look at somebody's tape and then go read somebody else's information, it would 100% change my perspective, or have the ability to change my perspective. And I don't want that to happen. So I try to do things with blinders on. So Barham's 243 right now. Is that what he tested at, Trace? Is that on this combine profile? Man, he looks so much bigger than 243. He was actually really good at the combine as far as someone to talk to. I do like Barham. I haven't dipped into him a whole lot. I mean, his athleticism was pretty poor, but I do like his physical traits. The question is, how is he going to fit? Is he more of an edge? Or is he more of a linebacker? Reading through some of his bio, at Maryland the first couple of seasons, he was a freshman All-American. He led the team with 6.5 TFLs. He tied the team lead for 4 sacks. He started 12 games. He had 58 tackles, 4 sacks, a PBU, and a forced fumble. His sophomore season, he was honorable mention All Big Ten Conference. He started 11 games, 37 tackles, 3 sacks, an interception, and a PBU. When he moved to Michigan, his stats pretty much remained the same. Now, he has an NFL comparison of Chop Robinson, and that would be a really good comparison. Really good comparison. I think depending on the scheme, depends on what he plays. I want to look at something here, just real quick. Got a few minutes left, and we're back at 3 p.m. for the offensive line breakdown. I'm curious. So did he test? He tested as a DE at the combine. So he finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He finished as the 7th best time of all of the defensive ends. Cassius Howell, who's extremely fast, finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He finished as 5th. So Jyshawn Barham's only 2 behind him, 0.05 seconds difference. For some reason, a 4.59 looks way better than a 4.64 because there's a 5. Even though it's a 4.59, it's not a 4.51 or a 4.54. It's a 4.5. A 4.5 is a 4.5. A 4.4 is a 4.4. Apparently, it doesn't matter if it's a 4.41 or a 4.49. I mean, obviously, Arvell Reese at a 4.46 is just insane. But I'm curious, at a 4.64, once his profile pops up, I'm curious. Come on, get off the screen. curious where all of the other linebackers finished. I know there's some really good times in there, but I'm going to switch to linebackers here. I'll throw it on the screen. All right, here we go. Okay. So you have your edge on the right, you have your linebackers on the left. 4-4-6 for Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese 4-4-6. Once you get down, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the seventh fastest linebacker was a 4.57. Jyshawn Barham was a 4.64. You get down in the top 10, and these linebackers are running 4.63s. Jacob Rodriguez ran a 4.57. So if Jacob Rodriguez is someone that Lions fans are thinking would be a good fit in Detroit, okay, let's click on Rodriguez. Let's click on Barham, and let's kind of compare them from athlete to athlete perspective, right? Just athlete to athlete, not skills, not fit, not position. Well, Barham, 2.5 inches taller, 11 pounds heavier, just under 2-inch arms longer, and a full inch bigger hand-wise. And if he were to test as a linebacker, he would have been way up there in score compared to where he tested as an edge. How does that make sense? I mean, they must have pretty low standards. So 4.57 40, 4.64, 10-yard split, 1.61 to 1.6. There's no difference. Now his vertical jump's a little bit light at 33, but the broad jump was longer, which would tell you initial burst is going to be better. Now what I don't have is the 3-cone and the 20 shuttle, but that 3-cone is going to help me identify a little bit more of the hip tightness. And where does that exist, from a hip tightness perspective. So as an edge, yeah, I would say testing wise, yeah, Barham probably makes a little bit more sense as an edge, but at 240 pounds, that's more of a speed rush kind of a guy. And Aiden run what, a 4.76? So Barham would be a lot faster. He doesn't have the vertical, and that would worry, a little bit as far as coverage. But my question is Barham's coverage ability. Like where does he end up in coverage? And I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back far enough later on today when I get an opportunity to look. I just want to see what he looks like here. Yeah, there's no coverage on here because they tested him as an edge. But solid run defense. Outside the tackle primary, off ball. Okay, 24 and 23. He was more off ball linebacker in 24. So here's what I'm going to ask all of you to do, because I'm going to come back with something on Barham. Go look at his 24 and 23 tape and look what he was doing as an off ball linebacker. And so 24, I believe, was at Michigan. 23 would have been at Maryland, I'm pretty sure. And we'll come back to this because there could be something to hear as to him becoming a will linebacker. I guess you could put him at the Sam spot too, more the strong side. And then bringing him up on the line and using him as an edge. So there could be some potential here that it could be a decent fit. But we're going to have to digress off of that, and we're going to be back here later on at 3 p.m. With Sports Info Solutions lead NFL scout Jeff Dean. We're going to be discussing the offensive line, who are the best fits to the Lions and why, and then who are the best overall offensive tackles in this class and why. We're going to get in deep. We're going to go through their website together in the scouting reports, and I'm interested to hear what Mr. Dean has to say. And then up next, we'll be getting into the edge with Nathan Cooper over the next couple of days or something. We'll have him on, and then we'll see who else is up next. We're going to just keep going through position by position as they have time to join in. But thank you all for joining me this morning on what wasn't supposed to be scheduled as a Rise or Grind morning show, but we did it anyway. Appreciate all of the chat and the engagement. Keep it rolling. Send some comments below. Tell me what you guys think about Kadyn Proctor, the number 1 overall pick at 17, or is it somebody else that you have on your list for the Lions here in the 2026 NFL Draft? Till the next time, you all have a wonderful day. Go One Pride, go Detroit Lions. We'll catch you guys later.
Pressured by Hutchinson.